What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I'm coming at you with an updated Labrynth deck for the new Banlist and post Photon Hypernova. This deck recently got a huge support card in Big Welcome Labrynth, and also with the format slowing down a bit, Ishizu getting a lot weaker, and the format just changing overall, this deck is in a prime position to really take over the meta in a big way and be at least like a top 5 deck in the meta. I think this deck will be a super strong option, and maybe it won't be like the best deck, because I think it will still be the best trap deck in the format and definitely a very strong contender. Before we get into this deck profile, I do want to let you guys know, Discord link down below along with all of our other social media links. Also, I'm trying to hit 14,000 subscribers, so if you do enjoy this Yu-Gi-Oh content and you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps me out and what I do here on the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this updated Labrynth deck profile. Alright, so starting off, I have 3 beautiful Starlight Rare Lady Labrynth of the... excuse me. Alright, so I only have 2 Starlight Rares, but yeah, we have 3 Lady Labrynth of the Silver Castle. I just never managed to pick up a third because this was a card I always thought playing at 2 would be a little bit better. However, testing the deck more, and one of the motifs I went as I built and tested this deck was I really wanted to open 2 engine cards bare minimum. There's a lot of hands where if you open 1 engine card, you really lose just like a single hand trap. Like Ash Blossom hurts tremendously because essentially your deck revolves around a bunch of Sanguines. So 3 Lady, she is a starter in the sense where if you draw her in a bunch of normal traps, she will eventually get you into Engine. So my goal is to see Engine as much as possible and play this deck where the deck really starts snowballing and doing what it's supposed to do as far as gaining advantage, and 3 Lady really helps. And I'm not sure, like this ratio is something that changes a lot because you don't want to see too many ladies, so there is a reason to play just 2, but I am playing 3 currently, so we do have to rock the 1 secret rare. Speaking about the card a little bit, if you're unfamiliar with her, she is your boss monster, or one of them anyways. She has really great protection while you control a set card where she can't be targeted or destroyed by card effects. And also, every time you activate a normal trap card, as long as your opponent doesn't have a response, you can set another normal trap card from your deck, which is huge. And the fact that she can special summon herself from hand is the reason you play more of her than your other boss monster. Speaking of which, we have 1 lovely Labrynth. Now, she is a one-of because unlike Lady Labrynth, she cannot special summon herself from the hand for free. She is a card that needs to essentially be special summoned by a bunch of different ways, either one of your Sanguines in Welcome Labrynth or Big Welcome Labrynth, or through Ariana's effect or your field spell. However, once she's on field, she's actually one of the deck's strongest cards by far. Her ability where your opponent cannot respond to your normal traps with monster effects is huge because all of a sudden, Ash doesn't hurt any of your Welcome Labyrinths. You can blow out entire boards with your trap cards simply because your opponent can't respond with monster effects. Then also, every single turn, she can activate her effect to target a normal trap in your graveyard and set it, which this gives you so much follow-up if she sits around and really gives you a lot of snowball potential. So those 2 effects are amazing, but then her third effect actually provides sort of an interrupt because when you remove one of your opponent's monsters from the field with your normal trap effect, you can either destroy a card on the field or in their hand non-targeting, which is really good. So she does so much for the deck, but you do just play 1 of her because she can't special summon herself for free. And, you don't want to lose her to a runic spell or Kashtira banishing stuff, but you don't absolutely need her to win. And Lady ends up being a little bit more important than Lovely in some game states, so 1 of her is completely fine. Then I am playing 3 Ariana, and she is the main starter of the deck. So again, like Lady Labrynth, I want to maximize copies of her and play 3. Yeah, she just on summon searches for any Labrynth card, which is huge. Most of the time you're searching for a Welcome, sometimes Lady, or some of your very important one-of pieces that I'll get to later. And then if she sticks on the field, she actually generates more advantage by drawing cards every time a monster leaves the field because of your normal trap effect. So she is insane for the deck, definitely something I want to maximize at 3. If I'm siding things like Lava Golem or Sphere Mode, I'll sometimes side 1 out, but overall I think maxing this at 3, especially, again, the motif was I wanted to see 2 engine cards when I built this deck. So 3 of her makes perfect sense. And the last Labrynth monster in the deck, and one of the most important, is Labrynth Kuklok. Now this is a card that you necessarily don't have to play because just like Lovely, he can feel like an engine brick. However, he's very important for some of your more powerful plays in the deck, and also post game 1, where you need to be able to set a Pointer of the Red Lotus from your deck and activate it that turn. It's very important to have Labrynth Kuklok as at least a one-of. Yes, he can sometimes contribute to weird hands if you draw him and Lovely together, or any other engine brick or a card that's not super playable, but I feel like this is an engine requirement that you have to play at least 1, and he makes some of your best plays in the deck. On to spells, I am running 1 Labrynth, the best named card in Yu-Gi-Oh! And yeah, this card's really powerful. We only play one because it's not necessarily pivotal to your strategy. Like, it's an insane card that when you have it up, you're gaining a lot more advantage. All your welcomes are popping. You can special summon monsters back, and it's really great, but it's not a starter, so it ends up feeling, again, like an engine brick or an engine requirement like Kuklok. And when you have your welcomes in rotation already, or your hand's good enough, you know, Ariana can search this card. And it's really good, but you don't lose, right, if Runic banishes it or Kashtira banishes it. So it's perfectly fine as a one-of. All right, on to a card I love talking about. Every time I do a Labrynth deck profile, I have 3 Pot of Prosperity. And some people will play Extravagance, and this is where I always end up explaining this card for such a long time. I'm going to try to keep it a little more brief, this profile. Essentially, this card is so much better than Extravagance. If you have access to both Prosperity and Extravagance, and you're just deciding which one to play, I highly recommend Prosperity, because even though Extravagance gets you 2 cards, which is super huge for trap decks, like, especially post game 1, finding your side deck cards is so much more important than seeing 2 random cards. Yes, those 2 cards could be great, but finding the best card in your top 6 is really important. And this card also frees up extra deck, which is pretty relevant as well, because you just have a lot of cards you actually do want an extra deck, even though they don't come up super often. I feel like Prosperity is a no-brainer over Extrav. You're missing out on 1 additional free card, but you see the best card out of your top 6. And past game 1, that means you're finding your Solemn Judgments or pointers to save you from, you know, Lightning Storm evenly matched, or you're finding your Lava Golems or your Sphere Modes or whatever you're siding to go second to beat, you know, all of the really powerful decks going second. So, in my opinion, you have to play this over Extravagance, but at the end of the day, if you prefer Extravagance, you can feel free to play it. It's a suitable replacement if you do not have Prosperity. Next up, I am playing 2 Pot of Duality, which this is something you don't see in Labrynth often. It's something I haven't played in a lot of lists either, because once you are in your Snowball and like you're special summoning a lot with your welcomes or with your engine, this card isn't something you ideally want to draw. But again, the objective of this deck was opening turn, I want to see 2 engine pieces, and playing both Prosperity and Duality, similar to like Fluandereeze or Dinomorphia that I profiled back in the day. Dig 9 is a super powerful option to just find the best cards in your deck, and running both Prosperity and Duality together does feel great, especially on your turn 1s. This will help you see your welcome Labyrinths, or like welcome along with a Solemn Strike, or just again 2 engine pieces, or finding any really powerful one-ofs in your deck, like the next card I'm going to show. Alright, this card is really insane, and honestly I wish I could play more of it, but there's a lot of reasons not to. So the card I'm talking about is Temple of the Kings. This card is amazing. It makes this deck, and like the speed at which it snowballs, just turned up to 11. Like, this card means you can activate welcomes on your first turn. It means every time Lady sets, that card is instantly able to be activated, as long as you haven't already used Temple of the Kings that turn. And essentially this is Kuklok, but every turn. So the reason you play Kuklok while you're playing this card still is because he's engine, so you can search him kind of whenever you need him. But drawing this card is absurd, and it's like so powerful, to the point where even though it can be a brick and it's really bad in your bad hands, I still almost want to play 2. However, I feel like 1 is fine, especially when you're playing Dig 9 in the form of all your Prosperities and your Dualities that can help find this card. I feel like 1 is perfectly okay. It means you're not running, like, you never want to see multiples of this card, so that's just simply not possible when you're playing 1. And the hands where you draw this with no engine and just like a bunch of good trap cards, it's really bad. It's essentially starting with 4 cards. So just 1 Temple of the Kings, I do think it's a phenomenal like addition to the deck if you're considering playing it. But yeah, I think this card's amazing. And the last spell on the deck is 1 Called by the Grave, simply because Ash Blossom is a true menace. And yeah, I feel like Called by the Grave is a completely fine card to have in the deck. And this card gets a lot better without all the shufflers in the format as well. So yep. Now on to the bulk of the deck, which is of course the trap cards. And we are going to start off with our 3 Welcome Labyrinth, which this card just like shot up in price, which is really unfortunate for people like wanting to play this deck, because it was going to be like a pretty good budget option, because Welcome wasn't like too expensive. Like, it wasn't budget, but it was cheaper than it is now. However, this card is one of the most important engine pieces of the deck, and just showing off the next card because I want to talk about them together, I am playing 3 big Welcome Labyrinth, and these, like, this was the best addition that Photon Hypernova gave this deck. I mean, it's really the only addition, but it's one of the best cards for the deck by far. It just, everything it does is so good, and it's really what the deck needed. And then also, why I wanted to talk about these together is I feel like it's really important to play 6 of your Welcome Labyrinths, Again, when I built this deck, my goal was 2 engine pieces. So there's a lot of lists playing 5 and either playing 2 big welcome or 2 welcome and then maxing out the other one. I'm maxing out both because, again, I want to see engine. You don't want to see like multiple welcome labyrinth in the same hand or multiple big welcome, but you do want to see both of them together because one, it sort of mitigates Ash Blossom's effectiveness against your deck. And when you have both, there's a bunch of nifty plays you can do with either Lovely or just recycling engine. And they both have insane grave effects, and together they actually work. Like if they're both in grave, they work together in a sense to like keep your engine rolling because you can summon Ariana, banish this, bounce her, and then reset your welcome labyrinth, right? So yeah, I want to max out like all the welcomes. Some people choose to play 5, maybe someone is trying 4, but I think 6 is the way to go. All right, on to the normal traps that actually like are removal and things that work with the engine because they remove monsters from the field. I'm gonna start off with 3 Compulse, which is not the most powerful card in the deck, but this card just is always guaranteed to do something for the deck. It fits what the deck's trying to do, which is remove monsters from the field by a normal trap effect. And it's always going to do something. Like, it's pretty impactful at interrupting, especially monsters from the extra deck. And it can bounce your own stuff to dodge imperm or things like that. It's a very solid card that is just very consistent because, again, it's always going to do something. So we choose to maximize this one, and it's also not once per turn, which means drawing multiple isn't bad. 2 Dogmatica Punishment, which this is a 2 of. Again, like unlike Compulse, this card is a hard once per turn, so you really don't want to draw multiples. It's more powerful than Compulse in a lot of situations, but unless something's unable to be destroyed by card effects, then this is also just like way... Like going second against Kashtira, this is much worse than Compulse, I would say. But yeah, it's a very powerful card. It's one of the traps that remove monsters from the field that you do want to play more than just one of it, because Punishment has just historically been one of the best traps in recent years, and it's no different in this deck. Now I have some one-of traps that remove monsters from the board, or just like really good to set off Lady. And you can play a bunch of one-of traps in this deck because they're all searchable like by one of your main engine pieces, so you can really do a lot of different things. But here's I have 5 one-ofs here that I really like in the deck, and I think all come up in different situations. So I have 1 Ice Dragon's Prison, which is a super powerful card that has been meta relevant in a lot of formats, but not in recent times, because especially against tier elements, it was so hard to use this card effectively because of the Ishizu shufflers. But now this card is very good, and it's not good versus every matchup, so I do have it at 1. And instead of like the second Ice Dragon's Prison, I'm still playing a Terrors of the Overroot. I think this card in a lot of situations is actually better than Ice Dragon's Prison, because it doesn't require the monster to like stay in grave. So if you activate this and target a monster in the graveyard, if they do something to it, it will still send the card on field to grave, which is huge. And yeah, I think Terror of the Overroot, the fact that it sends, can also be very good into certain cards. So I do like playing 1 and 1 for different situations. Then I have 1 Daruma Karma Cannon. This card is amazing, especially this format. I think it's really blowout. Like every time you flip this, it can feel like a turn ender because it just does so much in one card, especially versus Kashtira. This is also one of your best ways to out something like an Avermax or just unoutable monsters like Final Sigma is an example, with Mathmech probably coming back into the format to some extent. Things like Psychic End Punisher. Like, this is a card that outs things that trap decks normally can't out. So playing 1, I feel, is mandatory because of your Lady Labrynth. Next, brand new card from Photon Hypernova, we have 1 Waybridge. I was playing 3 of this before the ban list, and that's because it was one of the best go second cards into tier 0 tier elements. However, with the format definitely being a little bit slower and this not being as good into some matchups, I'm totally fine with just playing 1 of this when it's searchable and not maxing out on it. You could definitely choose to play more if you don't like any of the cards that I'm running, because it is a very powerful card, especially going second. But yeah, I just choose to play the 1. It's brand new, so I'll explain it for those who don't know. Essentially, if your opponent controls 2 more monsters than you do, you can force the opponent to send monsters they control to the graveyard until they only have 1. What's really powerful about this card is it affects the opponent, so it doesn't get like stopped by unaffected monsters and things of this nature. Very similar to Karma Cannon. And yeah, it's just a way to clear the board. Unlike Torrential, it doesn't clear your field, right? So this is a very powerful card. And then the last one I'm testing right now that is a little spicy, and I don't know if it will stay, but it's been testing pretty nice for me, is 1 Get Out. Now, this card rarely sees any play, but I'm always just hoping I'm in a format where I can play it, because I always want the card to be good and it just never has been. However, especially this format with the way Kashtira works, this card is super good against that deck because you can send both Shangri-Ira and Arise Heart just back to the extra deck with one card, which makes it so much higher impact than Compulse. It's a way, like, if they're going for Shangri-Ira and Diabolos, you can just send them there, or the Mind Hacker. Yeah, this card's really good. And the other decks in the format, like Branded, seem to be good. Sword Soul is probably going to be good. Sprite variants are still going to be there. There's a lot of decks where this card is actually okay. So I'm testing one for this format. If it doesn't work out, I may replace it to bump one of these up to 2. But I'm really liking the Get Out, and it has tested quite nicely. So it's a card I'm still tinkering with, but feel free to do with this slot what you will. Next is a card I usually play at 1 in this list, but it just seems pretty good this format, so I've upped it the ratio. I am playing 2-Dimensional Barrier. Yeah, this card versus Kashtira is insane. This card versus Branded is insane. This card versus Sword Soul is insane. There's just so many decks seeming to be hit by this card right now. Of course, we don't know exactly how the format's going to shake up, like, entirely, but we have a pretty good idea. Like, we know Branded's going to be strong. Sword Soul is going to be at least okay. Tearlaments are still fine enough, and Kashtira is perceived to be the best deck by many, and this is just good versus all of them, so I'm willing to play more than one of this, and I think 2 is a fair enough ratio. One of the most important traps to play in a heavy trap deck is the 3 Solemn Strike. This card just is so good at going second, and of course going first. Like, all traps are great going first, right? But going second, this and like Waybridge are just such powerful go second traps. That really allow you to play through your opponent's interrupts and what they have. And Strike also in this deck is really good for stopping Ash Blossom, because Ash Blossom on a Welcome Labyrinth can hurt a lot. So I am maximizing 3 Solemn Strike. The last card in the deck, and really the only Floodgate, I mean Dimensional Barrier is a Floodgate, but this is the only hard Floodgate in the deck. I am choosing to play 3 Gozen Match. And some people want to play more Floodgates in this deck, which if you do, it's perfectly fine to like just want to Floodgate your opponent. Me personally, I do not like decks that sort of revolve around Floodgating. There's so many bad things that can happen when you're like stalling with a Floodgate, or really hinging your strategy to like stop the opponent from playing completely. Because if it's like not a great card in the matchup, then you're pretty much wasting a slot. And then also if anything happens to your Floodgate, your deck can crumble very quickly. And I really don't like Floodgate strategies. I like to play the more interactive cards, especially because it works so well with this deck's engine. Like, even a few months ago, or really 6 months ago, when I was playing Dinomorphia and I got second place at the Tulsa Regional, everyone was playing that deck as a Floodgate deck, and I chose not to. I only mained 3 Floodgates, and it worked for me. I got second place. I was one of the like first people to top with Dinomorphia in the TCG. Me and like another guy got like the first regional tops with it. And yeah, I don't really like Floodgates, and that was another deck where I chose not to. And this one's similar. However, Gozen Match is very powerful. I do think playing 3 Floodgates is strong enough, because sometimes in a trap deck you do just need to have one card that deals with many and really lets you grind with your engine, and Gozen is the one I decided to play. Alright, that's it for the 40 card main deck. On to the extra deck, which a lot of it is pretty, free. You don't really need to go into many things in your extra deck, so it's a bunch of utility cards and things that might come up. So I'm playing the 1 Lingeribo for Ibly because it's very popular in Kashtira, and maybe even some Sprite variants will still choose to play it. Depends on how popular Sprite is, but yeah, Kashtira plays a lot of Ibly, so if they're trying to give that to you, you can make a Lingeribo. Then I have 2 Muckraker, which is one of the only cards that might come up more often than the others, because it's a good way to get Fiends back from your graveyard, like your lovely Labrynth. I feel like this card would come up way more often like it did in previous versions before Big Welcome came out, which Big Welcome can recycle the stuff in your graveyard, so maybe Muckraker is a little less good, but this card is still insanely powerful as far as an extra deck option, so I am choosing to play 2 of it. 1 Unicorn, something to climb into, and it's a Fiend. Your Welcome Labyrinth locks you into Fiend monsters from the extra deck and main deck, so you do need a lot more Fiends in your extra deck, and one of those is also the Unchained Abomination. Just something if you can link climb with a bunch of bodies, these are pretty good. And the last link in the deck is brand new from Photon Hypernova. It is 1 Bucephalus. And this card has 1 function and 1 function only, and that is to send exactly Garura from your extra deck. But with Punishment, essentially this allows you to out a big monster because he's 3500 attack, and then still send Garura, which can come up, so I am playing 1 Bucephalus. 4 Fusions, which are essentially all just Dogmatica Punishment targets. I have 3 Natisse. This is the card that usually matters the most as far as your extra deck is concerned, because even though there's a bunch of things you can dump off of Dogmatica Punishment, Natisse always ends up being almost the best one. just like generically the best. It's also a good way for this deck to out spells and traps because you really want to destroy monsters with your trap cards usually, so Dogmatic of Punishment can target a monster, and then you can still out pesky back row with this card. So 3 Natisse is fair enough. Then we have the 1 Garura I just mentioned, which is essentially a punishment target that can get you a draw. And now with Bucephalus it's even better because essentially Garura has 3500 attack. Last punishment target is a Cyberdark End Dragon, and this is just a 5k monster in case they have like a 4300 access code or something huge that this card can out. Yeah, just a 5k punishment target. And then for Xyz monsters, I am playing 1 Baguska because he's a fiend and he's a very solid rank 4. 1 Exciton Knight over like Zeus because he's a fiend and you can make him even under Welcome Labyrinth to out boards, and you have Ariana, which are level 4, and I've never had him come up, but he could, so I think he's one of the better cards to play in this slot. And then the last package I'm playing, even though they're not fiends, they could, in theory, come up. I am playing a Raiders Knight and an Arc Rebellion, which this comes up in a lot of my trap decks for whatever reason, like Dinomorphia was another one, where you can take 2 level 4 dark monsters and then make it a guy that can just end the game. Like, trap decks tend to have problems ending the game sometimes, so having like an extra deck way to just push for game is very big. And yeah, I think this package is okay. It's again something that hasn't come up for me at all in my testing, but it could. So yeah, I'm playing the Arc Rebellion and the Raiders Knight. That is going to be it for this updated Labrynth deck profile, and I'm just going to show the Starlight ladies on the screen here. Yeah, so this deck is obviously poised to be pretty good this meta. I think a lot of people are onto that, and I do think it's going to be really strong. I don't think it's going to be one of the best decks as far as like maybe even top 3, maybe a top 5 deck, but as the meta unfolds more, we'll sort of know more about that. The meta is still very new. In fact, by the time this video goes up, of course, the ban list isn't even legal yet, but a lot of people are looking at Labrynth currently as a really strong option for the new meta. So if you did enjoy this profile, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Again, it really helps me out in what I do here on the channel. And this has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.